On my birthday, my 2 sons vanished. What was exposed 3 weeks later was truly incredible. Sarah had never expected her milestone birthday to spiral into a nightmare. The morning light filtering through the trees had felt like a promise. But as the hours bled into uncertainty, despair tightened its grip on her heart. Jake and Tyler, her bright-eyed boys, had set off for a camping trip with their father, but plans had changed amidst a last-minute phone call that sent them off alone. Her chest tightened as she replayed the conversation, the warning in her gut barely audible over the voice of her responsibilities. Work as a nurse, a single mother, the pillars of her day-to-day life. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching into the corners of her mind. Was I foolish to let them go? She whispered into the empty air, her reflection on a steel surface revealing eyes heavy with doubt. A creeping realization clawed at her. Celebrating without them felt more like a recognition of failure rather than a joyous occasion. Questions swirled around her, drowning the few glimmers of hope. What kind of mother lets her children disappear? As the hours turned into days, the relentless pull of media attention intensified her public suffering. Flyers plastered everywhere, torn off by the winds of her own spiraling anxiety, brought uninvited whispers, a staccato of judgment that resonated within Sarah. Even the townsfolk who once smiled and waved seemed replaced by penetrating stares aimed, it felt, straight at her fading resolve. She was juggling too many burdens, and the weight of each one pressed down harder with every news anchor reporting on her boy's disappearance. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The 2-week mark was an unbearable weight pressing against her chest. Each tick of the clock seemed like a taunt from the universe. Shame morphed into anger, boiling under her skin. The local authorities, already under pressure, conducted searches that felt more like a show rather than an earnest hunt for her boys. Fueling her torment was the reality of her financial struggles, looming over her like storm clouds ready to engulf her in devastation. Would she look back on this one day and remember how she hadn't fought hard enough? How she hadn't done more? Then came the tip, a caller with trembling words that sent her stumbling into a murky underbelly she never knew existed in her seemingly innocent small town. A chill wrapped around her spine, igniting a relentless determination. What had she missed? What kind of world was she raising her boys in? The fear of being unprepared tightened around her throat, and with every unfolding detail, a newfound sense of purpose ignited with blazing intensity. In that moment, where anguish twisted into resolve, Sarah rehearsed the confrontation she imagined facing those who shrugged off her difficulties. She wasn't just a single mother. She was a warrior on a dedicated mission. But how much darker could the truth grow before it engulfed everything she loved? The thought terrified her. Yet the burning desire to protect her sons outweighed any inkling of retreat. As the first light of dawn approached, illuminating a world forever altered, she stood at a precipice. A flicker of hope returned as shadows loomed. Jake and Tyler would come home with tales to tell, but Sarah knew deep down that the knowledge they possessed would weigh heavily on her heart. Unraveled threads of her once normal world brushed against her consciousness. How could her next steps redefine their reality? Would she muster the courage to forge ahead against the currents threatening to sweep her away? Determined to unearth the truth behind her son's disappearance, Sarah took the first steps down a path that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. She knew now that waiting for answers was not an option. Waiting suggested passivity, and she was anything but passive. With the sun rising against a backdrop of her turmoil, she resolved to explore every dark corner that had been whispered about in hushed tones. Her nursing career had taught her resilience, how to nurture both body and spirit under dire conditions. Yet, this situation demanded something deeper, a raw, instinctual strength she had not fully acknowledged until now. She grabbed her phone, scanning through the messages still buzzing with the static of disbelief from family and friends, their well-meaning words offering little comfort. One message ignited curiosity. A local investigative journalist seeking a connection. Sarah's heart raced at the prospect of leveraging outside help. She messaged back, detailing her observations since the boys had vanished, the rustlings of the community's secrets, the lurking shadows she sensed across town. After a few moments that felt eternal, her phone rang. It was Oliver, the journalist. "Sarah, I've heard rumors about a group operating out here," he said, urgency filling his voice. "They might be related to your boy's disappearance. If it's true, then this isn't just about a camping trip gone wrong." A thrill of fear and adrenaline surged through her. The teenagers in her community had always seemed innocent, but the gravity of this news warped her perception. What was once a suburban haven appeared riddled with cracks and shadows, hints of something sinister that had masked itself under a quiet surface. She set their meeting for later that day and prepared herself for a confrontation she never expected to face. Hours of passing the time felt interminable, each moment reiterating her sense of urgency. She fidgeted, battling the rising doubts that tugged at her resolve. What if there wasn't anything to uncover? What if I'm wrong? Meeting in a cafe, Oliver's demeanor reflected a commitment to his craft. He listened as she recounted the details surrounding her boy's last days. His eyes sharpened with interest, and for the first time in weeks, her words began to weave a narrative that felt purposeful. In return, he revealed rumors, tales of adolescents acting strange and clandestine gatherings near the old quarry at the edge of town. She recognized the place. The boys had explored it with their father. The echoes of laughter now morphed into a haunting refrain. "We need to dig deeper," he urged, leaning in closer, "before they slip through our fingers again." The intensity in his eyes mirrored her own determination, amplifying the power of their collaboration. Adrenaline thrummed beneath her skin as she envisioned following up on his lead, yet a part of her hesitated. Was she ready to venture into this uncharted darkness? The pounding of her heart broke through the anxiety, and she shook her head decisively. "I have to find them," she whispered, barely audible, yet filled with newfound conviction. When they left the cafe, the sun hung low in the sky, the golden hue casting long shadows on the pavement. Each step resonated with purpose beneath her feet. She wasn't just stepping into a potential confrontation with danger. She was stepping towards empowerment. This journey could redefine her, not just as a mother, but as a fierce protector, armed with knowledge and resilience. As Sarah returned home that evening, a decision crystallized within her. She would not merely follow leads. She would become actively involved, confronting whatever lay ahead with a fierce resolve that would not be compromised. But as she stepped through her door, her intuition tingled with a warning. There might be observers watching her every move. The trap had been set. What awaited her on this treacherous path would either pull her deeper into darkness or illuminate the way to rescue her boys. The next step would demand courage beyond anything she'd ever summoned before, a determination haunted by the seductive lure of the unknown. Would she have the strength to break through, or would she risk everything, including her own sanity, just to discover the truth? The telephone buzzed insistently in Sarah's pocket, snapping her from a momentary daze as she scrolled absently through her notes from the cafe meeting. She glanced at the screen, her heart quickening as she read Oliver's name flashing ominously in the fading light of her living room. Answers were too often elusive, and with each passing day, doubt gnawed at her soul. Yet she latched on to resolve, desperate to keep moving forward. "Sarah!" His voice crackled through the line, urgency palpable. "There's something I need to tell you. I think I've found a lead." Her breath caught in her throat. "What is it?" "There's a local club. Members are influencing some of the kids in our community. Talk of it has been swirling, but I didn't want to implicate anyone without solid evidence. I might have a reliable source." He paused, gauging her reaction. "This could connect directly to your boys?" Every muscle in her body tensed, straining against the weight of her disbelief and foreboding. These were not just casual teenage escapades. This could be darker than she imagined, and yet she felt herself drawn to this thread, desperate for clarity. "We need to investigate it right away." "Absolutely," Oliver affirmed. "Meet me at the old quarry tomorrow at noon. I think we can blend in with the crowd." The quarry loomed in her mind, a place steeped in nostalgia, but now tainted with fear. "What if it's dangerous?" she asked, hesitating, the mother's instinct warring with her growing resolve. "Then we're cautious. But we can't afford to overlook any chance to find your boys," he replied, his tone firm, that steadiness fortifying her decision. As they hung up, Sarah steeled herself for the morrow, her heart pounding with trepidation and anticipation alike. She would step into that world, into the fringes of adolescence, where secrets simmered just below the surface. Yet, as she lay in bed that night, uncertainty gnawed at her like a distant thunderstorm brewing. Despite her fears, something transformative blossomed within her. This wasn't just about determination. It was about reclaiming agency, about recognizing her autonomy to confront the unimaginable. A relentless urge to protect her sons ignited a passion she hadn't realized she possessed. No longer just a passive participant in her life's narrative, she was ready to take charge, to wield the strength born from her professional background and maternal instincts. Morning dawned, the light casting a sharpened clarity over her surroundings. Sarah moved through her morning routine with purpose. Each action bolstered her resolve. The simple rhythms of preparing breakfast and donning her clothes turned into deliberate rituals that fortified her spirit. As she stood in front of the mirror fastening her earrings, she barely recognized the woman looking back, tired but fiercely resolved, stronger than she had allowed herself to believe. The drive to the quarry was a blur of asphalt and thoughts. What awaited her? Could she really confront this tangled mess that young lives had woven? She inhaled deeply, grounding her swirling thoughts. The decision to dig into her son's disappearance was more than a quest for truth. It laid bare her own journey of empowerment and recovery, a path fraught with uncertainty but lit by fierce love. When she arrived, the eerie stillness of the quarry was punctuated by distant sounds. Laughter and whispers echoed, hinting at a gathering. A knot twisted in her stomach, yet she stepped forward, eyes scanning for Oliver amid the crowd like a hawk searching for its prey. Would this day deliver clarity, or would it thrust her deeper into danger? Suddenly, from the corner of her eye, she spotted a figure, a young boy she didn't recognize, but something about him felt unsettlingly familiar. He was watching her, an intensity in his gaze that sent a chill racing down her spine. Then, just as quickly, he vanished into the throng. Sarah's heart raced. Who was he? Was he connected to her boys? The tangled web was tightening, and the stakes were about to rise dramatically. Would she have the fortitude to unravel it? The crowd at the quarry pulsed with energy, a juxtaposition of life and uncertainty. As laughter and shouts echoed off the weathered stone, Sarah felt the gravity of her mission weighing heavy on her chest. She searched for Oliver among the faces blurring together, her senses heightened, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Each passing moment thrummed with imminent danger. Although she felt more alive than ever, the stakes were perilously high. "Keep it cool," Oliver had said once they'd agreed to meet. But how could she stay calm when she was so close to the mystery behind her son's disappearance? She inhaled deeply, attempting to center herself, the practiced breath of someone who had faced many an unexpected challenge in her professional life. Yet this felt far more personal, far more consequential. As she settled herself against a graffitied boulder, she began taking note of her surroundings, scanning the crowd for anything unusual. They were young, teenagers mostly, their faces a kaleidoscope of rebellion and youthful confidence. Shadows of cigarettes danced in the flickering light of an unseen fire, and whispers bubbled like secrets spilling over. This was no casual gathering. It was a gathering of lives intersecting at a crossroads, and Sarah needed to understand which path they were on. Then she caught movement out of the corner of her eye, the same boy, slim and wiry, who had watched her earlier. He was retreating backward, his gaze darting nervously, as if he sensed her eyes on him. Something stirred in her. Perhaps he was scared, perhaps lost, or maybe he held fragments of the truth she so desperately sought. Fueled by instinct, Sarah stepped down from her perch, her heart not only pounding with fear, but with an unexpected resolve. "Hey!" she called out, the sound ripping through the ambient noise. The boy hesitated, turning slightly, uncertainty painting his features. In that moment, Sarah's voice transformed from mere inquiry to a command, beckoning him back. He turned fully, eyes wide, and for a moment she was struck by the vulnerability within. "What do you want?" he stammered, an edge of defensiveness fighting against the tremor of alarm. "Are you connected to the boys who went missing?" Sarah pressed, daring to step closer. The chatter of the crowd faded, and it felt as if they were the only two people in this world at that moment. A flicker of recognition crossed his face, but it was gone just as quickly. "I don't know what you're talking about," he mumbled, attempting to slip away. "Please," she pleaded, desperation creeping into her tone as she reached out to grab his arm. "You have to help me." He recoiled, pulling free, and her heart sank. But the fleeting moments of silence suggested a struggle within him. The air crackled with tension, and she could sense that he was teetering on the edge of decision. She could see him weighing his options, the risks of speaking against whatever danger loomed in the shadows of this gathering. "Why should I? You're just a stranger," he countered, but his resolve seemed brittle, ready to shatter. "Because I'm a mother," she stated firmly, "and I won't stop until I find my children." The words rang definitive between them, reverberating in the charged atmosphere. His gaze flickered to the ground, then back to her, a tempest of conflicting emotions etched across his face. Sarah's heart raced. Here was an opportunity, the truth hung in the air, tantalizingly close, yet shadowed with uncertainty. Just then, a loud cheer erupted from the crowd, pulling both their attentions. In that instant, the boy's expression hardened again, fear making way for the instinct to blend in. "Look, just stay away from me," he implored, as he began to back away. Sarah searched his eyes, longing to latch onto a fragment of hope or a cryptic clue, but found only retreat. With each step he took, a wave of frustration and anger coursed through her, a potent mix of helplessness that threatened to engulf her. Yet, she couldn't allow it. The moment felt like a vine unraveling one more layer of this dense mystery. She was no longer just a mother searching for answers. She was a hunter of truth, and the stakes had transformed into something more authoritative than ever. As the crowd surged, she felt a tightness in her chest, unwilling to let him go. One last attempt. "If you know anything, if you see my boys, promise me you'll talk." Their eyes locked, a silent conversation threading between them. But he was gone, swallowed back into the chaotic energy of the crowd. Each second thereafter felt like an eternity. The shadows around her deepened, and she realized she had no choice but to return to Oliver, to share the brief encounter and piece together the fragments they could find. As she turned, edged by a mixture of apprehension and determination, the boy's face loomed large in her mind. What if he could piece together a part of her lost family? An uncomfortable thought settled. Was this just a dead end, or was it the beginning of something much deeper? She steeled herself, knowing that somewhere in this tumultuous crowd, more secrets lay waiting to be discovered. The urgency surged within her once more. The inquiry was relentless, and she was resolute. The next step in her pursuit wouldn't be mere investigation. It would demand tenacity, strategy, and perhaps a confrontation with those who sought to keep her answerless. Would she have the strength to face what came next? The moment of truth was inching closer, But what lay ahead could change everything. Sarah's pulse raced as her feet carried her toward Oliver. With each hurried step, determination fused with anxiety, the intensity of the moment gnawing at her composure. The crowd, full of vibrant energy moments ago, morphed into a surreal blur as her focus narrowed to a singular goal: unraveling the threads of her son's mystery. They could be somewhere out there, hidden amidst the chaos, and she was not about to let fear dictate her actions. Oliver stood near a crude bonfire, his visage hardened by concern. The familiarity of his presence was both comforting and unnerving. She approached him, pushing past the rising intimidation crafted by the weight of their mission. His eyes scanned her face, and she understood him quickly. He sensed the urgency and desperation radiating off her. "What happened?" he asked, his voice steady but muffled by the surrounding exuberance. "There was a boy," she said, struggling to articulate the fleeting moment from earlier. "He knew something. I could see it. But he was scared, fearful of being seen." Sarah noticed Oliver's brow furrowing as he nodded slowly, his mind operating on the same wavelength as hers. "He might know people involved," Oliver suggested, his gaze flicking toward the crowd. "Youth code often works in layers, but you need to approach this carefully. Kids like that, especially if they're involved, they're wary of adults, especially ones who seem desperate." "Desperate. That's exactly what I am," she admitted aloud, the weight of her reality flooding in. Gripping her hands together, she felt the bristle of determination hardening her resolve. "But I can't let inaction paralyze me. We need to find him again, to gain his trust." "Finding him isn't enough, Sarah," Oliver interjected, his cadence shifting. "You could uncover something larger, dangerous even. Are you prepared for that?" Her heart thudded heavily within her chest, a steady reminder of the stakes on the line. "I didn't come this far to walk away from a fight," she replied, as her voice gained conviction. Without pausing, Sarah mentally mapped the parameters of the quarry. "Let's split up," she proposed, already calculating the best approach. "I'll retrace my steps, look for that boy, while you keep an eye on the larger picture. Observe the crowd. Maybe someone is on the fringes watching. Maybe they'll reveal themselves." Oliver hesitated, glancing at the chaos around them, but then he nodded. "Just be smart about it." He took a step back, preparing to blend in among the thrumming mass of youth. As she moved deeper into the throng, Sarah's mind raced with possibilities, weighing every prospect as if balancing on a precarious tightrope. This was not just about her children anymore. This was an awakening. She was recognizing her own capabilities. She was willing to confront fear head-on and faced with decisions that could lead her into the unknown. Sarah scanned for telltale signs of the wiry boy or familiar faces that might connect back to her sons. The environment transformed into an enigmatic puzzle, each laugh, shout, or flickering light possibly holding crucial secrets. There was a raw quality to the joy around her, as if the crowd had grasped a piece of life she had yet to reclaim. Then, through the clamor, she caught sight of a lean silhouette, a figure darting away from the dancing flames. "Wait!" A glimmer of familiarity ignited her desperation. It was him, the boy. This time, determination pushed her forward. There was no space for hesitation. "I need to talk to you!" she shouted, weaving through the bodies that swayed and pulsed. As he turned, fear shadowed his features once more, but there was something else buried beneath it, an ember of recognition perhaps. A flicker of conflict crossed his face as their eyes met. He was trapped between instinctual fear and the pull of truth. "Please," she pressed, the urgency flipping through her mind. "I can help, but you need to help me first." His body tensed, and Sarah instinctively recognized the fading moment where he could either flee or step forward into the light she offered. In that silence, a choice was hanging, teetering between fear yet yearning. "You have to believe me," she urged, gathering every ounce of compassion and clarity she could muster. "This isn't just about you or me. It's about those boys. If you know anything, if you've seen them, The moment slowed as she watched him grapple internally, and a micro-expression crossed his face. Was it regret or resolve? She waited, breaths shallow, the world around them fading again. Then he glared with newfound determination. "Take me to Oliver. He's the one I can trust." The revelation pierced through her. The roots of an unexpected alliance were dawning. Who else had been lurking in the shadows? What connections bound them together that she had yet to unravel? As they turned to find Oliver, Sarah realized that doors were swinging wide open, opening not only paths to answers, but perhaps challenges that could redefine her journey even further. With a single glance at the boy beside her, Sarah understood one thing clearly. The tides were shifting. Her hunt for the truth was only beginning, and now she was not alone in this fight against darkness and uncertainty. What new truths awaited them, and what sacrifices would they have to make to uncover them? The answers loomed just out of grasp, like shadows waiting to manifest in an uncertain light. As they navigated through the shifting masses of bodies, Sarah's heart surged with mixed feelings, hope entwined with trepidation. The boy, still hesitant, walked closely by her side, his form increasingly familiar, yet infinitely enigmatic. She caught glimpses of his face, scrunched with uncertainty, still wrestling with his choice. It reminded her of her own journey, her emotional labyrinth that she had traversed blindly for so long. "Why do you trust him?" she pressed gently, hoping to reach whatever fragile thread hummed within him. The boy glanced sideways, surprise flickering across his features. "Because you're different," he said, his voice a whisper overshadowed by the vibrant noise. "Most adults just want to shove their way in, or take something they don't really understand." Her breath caught in her throat at his insight. "Then maybe we can work together," she suggested, allowing the sincerity of her intentions to wash over her words. "I won't push. We can take this one step at a time." The boy nodded slowly, but remained still, caught in a web of hesitations. Alone, he had been a ghost amongst the living. Now, he was reluctantly stepping into the light, yet hesitating with every step. They spotted Oliver, waiting at the edge of the crowd, his posture alert, attentive. When he saw them, a mix of relief and suspicion crossed his face, but it quickly morphed into determination as they approached. "You brought him," he said, his voice low but charged with potential. "His name is Felix," Sarah introduced, as she felt a curious connection forming. "He has information." Once surrounded by the flickering warmth of the bonfire, Sarah sensed the hesitation in Felix, the guarded walls he had built around himself. The moment hung in the air, uncertain and heavy. "What do you know about the others?" she asked, directing her focus entirely on Felix. She needed to pull him away from his fear and urge him toward the bonds they could forge together. I've seen them," he stammered, his voice barely above the rustle of the night. "They disappear into the old mill. It's a hideout for kids looking to escape, or something worse." The gravity of his words sank into her, raising a new storm of questions within her mind. "Escape?" Oliver interjected, his expression sharpening. "From what?" "I don't know," Felix replied, his eyes darting toward the ground. "But I've heard things. Rumors, bad ones. There are people. Adults." He swallowed hard, his throat tightening with the weight of what he was revealing. "They come for kids like us, for whatever reason." In that instant, Sarah recognized the pivotal moment unfolding. The determination that had driven her here teetered on the brink of overwhelming dread. The world had shifted. Now they were staring into a dark reality that lay hidden beneath the surface, the shadows dancing on the edges of their lives. "What if they're after your brothers?" Oliver asked, probing deeper into the threat that loomed large. Felix flinched. "I don't know. But if they are, you have to be careful. They don't play by the same rules. They could be keeping them against their will." The plea in his eyes mirrored her own desperate fears, amplifying her resolve. This was not simply a search now. It was a battle against forces far more daunting than she had anticipated, not only for her sons, but for the collective innocence claimed by others who'd fallen prey to the darkness lurking unchecked. "Then we have to act," she declared, her voice gaining strength. "We can't wait for someone else to intervene. We need to get to that mill and uncover the truth together. Expose whatever shadows are brewing in the corners." Felix hesitated, fear and uncertainty etching lines on his face. "It's dangerous." "So is inaction," she countered, the weight of her words hanging heavily in the air. "I didn't come all this way to back down now." For the first time, she saw a flicker of determination ignite in Felix's eyes, a burgeoning connection forged in the fire of shared purpose. They were all bound by a quest to unveil the threat, preserve the innocence of those lost, and free her children from unseen chains. As they steeled themselves to begin this journey into the unknown, Sarah felt a ferocious determination swell within her, a force she had yet to fully comprehend. Was she truly ready for the confrontation that lay ahead? Yet before she could ponder further, a sharp whistle pierced the night, followed closely by the anxious expressions of several youths who remained seated in the distance. A shift was occurring, an awareness growing among those watching them. Who else was observing their every move? Ready or not, they were being drawn into a game much larger than any of them. Sarah took a deep breath, sensing the gravity of the moment, the pieces of the unfolding turmoil collapsing together. Everything had changed. The time had come to face what shadows lurked in the corners of their reality. Would they summon the courage needed to confront the darkness, or would it consume them instead? The answers beckoned, but uncertainty rode alongside her, intensifying the danger of each step yet to come. With the moonlight spilling through the trees, Sarah's heart raced, ignited by urgency. She scanned the faces surrounding the dim bonfire, uncertainty written on them. The earlier chatter faded into the background, replaced by a thickening tension that wrapped around her and the group. They were on the precipice of an uncharted territory, where decisions could lead either to liberation or danger. "Felix," she began, her voice steady, yet laced with urgency. "Can you show us where the mill is? We can't afford to waste any time." He swallowed, the fear smoldering in his eyes like the dying embers of their fire. "It's not just about finding the place," he whispered. "It's also about what's inside." Each word he spoke felt like a new weight being added to her chest, yet her resolve solidified. She needed to lead them forward, to tackle whatever dangers awaited them. The truth was unvarnished, staring back at her through the guise of Felix's uncertainty. She gathered her thoughts, preparing herself for the confrontation ahead. She had come too far to backtrack now, the stakes too high for hesitation. "Oliver, you stay close to Felix," she instructed, as they formed a loose circle around the younger boy. "Make sure he feels safe. If we're going in there, we're going in together." The flicker of incredulity on Oliver's face ignited her frustration. "What about you?" he challenged, eyebrows furrowing. "What if—" "Then I'll find my own way out," she interrupted, shifting her focus back to Felix. The instinct to protect herself, to operate from fear, could not overpower the necessity of courage in the face of potential harm. If there were children trapped, she wouldn't rest until she found them. Felix nodded slowly, inspiration taking root amidst his fear. A sense of agency began to light his features. Perhaps he was beginning to recognize that his voice mattered, that he held power in this chaotic reality. They moved in the direction Felix pointed, a trudge through the thick underbrush carved by their accumulating resolve. It was a surreal transition, stepping from the safety of the bonfire's glow into the looming shadows that danced with uncertainty. As they edged closer to the old mill, Sarah's mind spooled out scenarios, each one painted with horror but also tinged with a growing sense of purpose. A rustling sound broke the tension, making her heart leap into her throat. She turned sharply, scanning the darkness that swallowed the trees. The shadow of a figure lingered at the periphery. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steady despite the surge of adrenaline. The figure stepped forward, illuminated by the faint light of the moon. A girl, perhaps close to Felix's age, with a disheveled appearance and wild eyes filled with fear. "You shouldn't be here," she warned, her breath quickening. "No one comes back from the mill." Those words echoed in the hollow of Sarah's chest, but it wasn't revulsion she felt. It was desperation spiraling into clarity. "We have to help them," she implored, already feeling the weight of her intentions mold her resolve into a solid mass, propelling her forward. "Do you know anyone who took them?" The girl glanced at Felix, hesitating. "They took my brother," she murmured, pain bleeding into her words. The raw vulnerability reflected the brutal reality of their plight. It ignited an understanding in Sarah. They were not alone in this fight. This was about endurance, about fighting for their right to safety and the freedom of those who had been silenced. Felix stepped in beside her, drawing strength as he faced the girl. "We can't let fear stop us. Together, we can change things." The girl shifted, uncertainty mixing with the flickering embers of hope ignited by his words. Courage wasn't just reserved for adults, it bloomed in their hearts as well. With each step toward the mill, Sarah felt an invisible bond weaving them together. 3 souls intertwined in shared defiance, crafted from the remnants of their shattered security. Yet, as they moved forward, the ambient tension escalated, warning them of the forces waiting in the shadows. Just before reaching the derelict structure, a deafening roar filled the air, startling them. The ground trembled momentarily beneath their feet, as if the realm of darkness itself trembled with their approach. Was this the beginning of a battle, the first true test of their resolve? In that electrifying moment, everything felt precarious, but Sarah drew from the well of determination that pulsed within. Would they find the answers they sought within those crumbling walls, or would the shadows consume them, extinguishing their flickers of hope in the face of unyielding despair? As they breasted the threshold of the mill, the uncertainty loomed larger than life itself, daring them to uncover the secrets hidden within the darkness. As they crossed the threshold of the mill, a suffocating darkness enveloped them, swallowing the refracted beams of silver light. The air was thick with dust and dampness, collecting in her throat like unshed tears, pressing them downward. Sarah knew the stakes were impossibly high. Each step further into the mill was a commitment to face whatever lay ahead. But fear threatened to seep into her resolve. "Stay close," she murmured, instinctively gripping Felix's shoulder, as though anchoring them all in the moment. The rusted machinery peeked through cobwebs, stark silhouettes that loomed like sentinels, whispering tales of entrapment. For a fleeting second, the weight of the past history pinned her down. It was an unwelcome reminder of despair, of the many who had ventured into darkness and never returned. But she steeled herself. The fire within her refused to be extinguished. "We have to keep moving," she insisted, trying to imbue her companions with both urgency and courage. They pressed on, maneuvering around debris that marked the path of neglect. Each creak of the floorboards and echo of their footsteps echoed in her mind, a countdown to the moment of confrontation she anticipated but dreaded. "Do you think he's in here?" Felix's voice trembled, cutting through the silence. Sarah turned, her expression open yet resolute. "We have to hope so," she replied, the weight of her words anchoring them together. It was not just about finding someone, it was about the fight to reclaim what had been taken. The idea provided a tiny spark of motivation in the oppressive gloom. She felt the eyes of innocence upon her. She had become a reluctant beacon. As they progressed deeper into the mill's bosom, Oliver's sudden gasp shattered her focus. He pointed ahead, where shafts of dim moonlight formed a jagged spotlight on something moving. "Look," he hissed. A figure emerged, shadowy and frail, stumbling toward them through the visceral darkness, his face gaunt and eyes sunken. "Help!" he croaked, voice cracked as if he were a mere echo of the boy he once was. "Who are you?" Sarah demanded, her heart racing at the thought that this could be Felix's brother. The boy staggered closer, flecks of ash and grime coating his clothes. I'm Caleb, he coughed, desperate and broken. They took us, but I managed to escape. Not everyone. His revelation struck Sarah like a punch. A wave of clarity rushed over her. This was not just an investigation or a rescue. It was a confrontation with the entities that wielded power over them. A reckoning against the institutions of ignorance and fear. Standing in the mill, in the presence of another victim, her resolve crystallized. She felt both terrified and empowered. The system might have designed this building as a place of silence, but she understood now that this moment was larger than survival. It was about illumination, breaking through the darkness, exposing the truth. "What do you mean, not everyone?" she pressed, urgency bleeding through her words. Caleb's eyes darted to the shadows, fearing their return. "They keep them in the cellar. A lot of us are still trapped. You have to hurry," he gasped as adrenaline surged through him. A grim sense of duty enveloped her, and Sarah felt the depths of her courage as she rapidly assessed the situation. The real challenge lay ahead. The stakes had risen. She faced her companions, her voice steady now. "We need to rally and free whoever is down there. This isn't just about one person anymore. It's about all of us." As they descended the narrow, dark staircase toward the cellar, Sarah's heart thundered. Every instinct screamed for caution, yet a growing conviction swept through her, whispering that courage could not live in avoidance. With each step, uncertainty morphed into an insurmountable decision. They were walking into the abyss, but also toward the possibility of liberation. Would they be able to confront whatever institutional horrors awaited them in the shadows? As the cellar door creaked open, the darkness beneath seemed to breathe, drawing them in with an almost sentient pull. The moment of confrontation and revelation loomed just ahead, relentless, asking for their commitment to change the narrative once and for all. Would they emerge as victors or succumb to the very fears that threatened to define them? Only time would reveal the answer. As they entered the cellar, the stench of mold and decay coiled around them, thick and suffocating. The dim light from the staircase receded rapidly, leaving them in an abyss of uncertainty. Sarah's pulse quickened. The walls seemed to close in, the oppressive atmosphere amplified by the weight of Caleb's words. "Do you hear that?" Oliver whispered, straining to listen. The four of them halted, absorbing the sounds that reverberated through the murky space. Soft whimpers, distant cries, human voices, trapped, muted by the very walls that had imprisoned them. Fear knotted in Sarah's stomach, but beneath it burned a furious determination. "Let's move," she commanded softly but firmly, squeezing Felix's hand for a moment of solidarity. Each step deeper into the cellar was a step further from the safety of the surface, yet she could feel her resolve strengthening. Her mind raced through tactics. They needed a plan, a way to navigate the chaos that awaited them. "We should split up," she suggested, weighing the risks. "Oliver and I will search for a way to free them. Felix, stay with Caleb. If anyone comes, you have to be ready to react. We can't risk anyone getting caught." Felix's face paled, and Sarah could sense his anxiety. This was uncharted territory, and the stakes were grotesquely high. "What if—" "No, we don't have time for what-ifs." The breath hitched in her throat as she cut him off. She felt the weight of leadership settle upon her shoulders, a realization dawning that strayed from fear. It was empowerment. In this moment, she wasn't just another voice in the dark. She was a catalyst. They nodded, resolute but trembling. With a final look at Felix, who mustered a weak smile to reassure her, she plunged into the cellar's depths with Oliver at her side. As they moved towards the far end of the room where the noise seemed louder, Sarah's heart raced, not with fear, but adrenaline. Wouldn't it be easy to just turn back, fade into safety? The thought rattled like a chain, but she silenced it. Each conviction that permeated her actions dismantled the walls of hesitation planted in her mind. She was facing real monsters. those who enforced silence and suffering. Suddenly, they stumbled upon a heavy wooden door, its surface pockmarked and weathered. "This has to be it," Sarah breathed, her fingers trailing over the cold metal latch. Before she could question her instinct, she shoved the door open. The sight before her thrust her heart into her throat. Rows of young faces, pale and defeated, stared back at her from line of makeshift cages. The silence shattered as her presence registered, horrified gasps escaping the prisoners, countless eyes wide with vulnerability and hope. "What is this place?" Oliver breathed, horror etched across his features. "The very embodiment of everything we are fighting against," Sarah replied, shaking off the numbness. The instant realization that they were not just rescuing her brother, but unearthing a systemic horror sent a pulse of rage throbbing in her veins. "We are going to get you out of here." Somewhere within the chaos, she felt a sudden shift, a third voice entwined with the whispers of despair. "Sarah?" Her heart leapt. It was unmistakable. It was Felix's voice. She whipped around, eyes searching the shadows. There he was, his expression a swirl of dread and determination. "I found something," he said urgently, waving her over. As she approached, the tension seized her. Had he discovered another locked door, or a weapon? Felix held out a crumpled photograph, an image of the facility's blueprints. "It leads to an exit," he managed, his eyes darting to the frightened faces. And just like that, Sarah felt the weight of desperation lift slightly off her shoulders. The plan had shifted. This wasn't merely salvation. This was revolution. As they gathered to discuss their next steps, Sarah's confidence swelled, bolstered by a new clarity of purpose. "What did I tell you? We are not just rescuing. We're fighting back," she declared, her voice hardening with resolve. This was no longer just a mission of survival. They were redefining their narrative. As she spoke, something shifted again. The shadows behind the bars stirred ominously. The dreadful reality loomed over them. What if time was running out? The urgency filled the space, and the impending threat loomed just beyond the threshold of their awareness. The fight was far from over, and looming questions filled her heart. Who was orchestrating this chaos, and how would they confront their pervasive darkness? As she glanced at her allies and the frightened faces around her, she knew one thing. They were moving toward a confrontation that would not just unveil truths, but change her forever. What awaited on the other side of that threshold? As Sarah braced herself and her newfound allies, the stark reality of their predicament settled in like an unwelcome fog. The tension within the cellar thickened, mirroring the urgency of their mission. They were standing on the brink of a formidable challenge, but empowerment surged through her veins, igniting a fierce determination that she hadn't known existed. "Okay," she said, voice steady and assertive. "We need to act quickly and decisively. Felix, you're with Oliver and me. We'll guide everyone out through the exit you found. This is our chance, not just to escape, but to put an end to this nightmare." The resolve in her voice seemed to resonate with the frightened faces in the cages, igniting a flicker of hope in their weary gazes. As she turned back, the shadows continued to dance ominously against the rough stone walls, whispering resignations of lives stolen. "Everyone, listen," Sarah proclaimed, heartbreak mingling with her fierce resolve. "We're going to get you out of here, but you need to stay quiet and follow us. We have an exit plan." A chorus of muted gasps echoed from the rows of cages as the prisoners processed her words, the tension manifesting in nervous energy. With a swift motion, Sarah gestured for Oliver to lead the way, positioning Felix at the forefront with the blueprints clutched tightly in his hands. Just behind them, she saw Caleb's anxious face, and a wave of pride coursed through her. They had become allies in this battle, a collective force fiercely resisting the darkness that had threatened to consume them. "Let's move," Oliver said, breaking the silence, his voice a beacon of steel resolve. Together, they ventured deeper into the shadows, retracing Felix's route. Adrenaline surged with each footfall. Every creak of the ancient wooden floors resonated like the tolling of a bell, signaling their imminent confrontation with whatever horrors lay ahead. As they reached the door leading out of the cellar, Sarah's heart pounded like a drum, synchronized with their every whisper and quick breath. She placed her hand on the cool, rusted handle and paused for a moment, setting eyes on her companions, faces strained but resolute. For a fleeting instant, fear pricked at her resolve. What awaited them on the other side? But before she could succumb to uncertainty, a fierce voice inside her commanded, "I can do this." She tightened her grip on the handle, letting her conviction overtake her anxieties. With a swift motion, she flung the door open. The moment they spilled out into an empty corridor, a shrill alarm echoed through the facility, jarring her confidence into focus. "Run! We're out of time!" she yelled, adrenaline propelling her forward. The risk had crystallized into a race against their pursuers. The hallways twisted and turned. Each corner felt treacherous. Shadows of their previous trauma chased them, but together they surged forward, adversity spurring them into action, not silence. Instinctively, Sarah led them toward the exit, recalling the layout from a fleeting glance at the blueprints. "To the left," she urged. "There's a stairwell that should lead to the back of the mill. We just need to reach the outside." Strained breaths filled the air as they followed her direction, fear intermingled with hope driving them forth. But as they approached the stairwell door, footsteps thundered behind them. "Go!" she shouted, pushing everyone through the narrow passageway. She could sense the danger encroaching, the shadows closing in on them as her heart raced. Survival hinged on speed. But with each moment, as the tumult swirled around them, the bond between the group forged an ironclad resolve. "Keep going!" Oliver yelled, glancing back to gauge how close their pursuers were. "We can't slow down now." Finally, reaching the stairwell's end, Sarah pulled open the door, breathing in the crisp air that washed over her as they burst into the open. The world outside had transformed. The sun hung low, trailing amber colors across the horizon. Freedom was tangible, yet the fight was far from over. Upon scrambling to their feet, Sarah turned to her allies. "We're not just escaping. We're exposing what's been happening here." With those words igniting a fire in her chest, she caught sight of a parked police car in the distance, idle but alive. "There, we need to go to the authorities. They're our first line of defense." When their group drew closer, fatigue weighed heavily in their exhausted limbs. Yet they kept moving, the hope for liberation fusing tightly within their hearts. As they banged on the patrol vehicle's door, the sound reverberated through the air, a stark plea for help echoing back at them. "Please, you have to listen," Sarah shouted when the officers emerged, their expressions shifting from confusion to concern. "We need your help. There are kids trapped inside the mill, victims of—" The officer nodded, comprehending the urgency in her voice. They relayed her words to dispatch while the adrenaline surged. This had surpassed mere rescue. Now they tangled with a powerful resistance. "Let's move," the officer instructed. "Take us to the scene." Moments later, with flashing lights tracing their wake, they surged back toward the mill, guided by a clear determination to dismantle the sinister reality that had left the community in its grip. As they approached that fateful structure once more, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility transform into something larger than herself. They were no longer trapped in fear. No, they were warriors armed with a purpose, finally ready to confront the pervasive shadows that had cast doubt over them for far too long. "Together," she whispered, reassuring her companion's resolve. They would expose the truth, they would protect those who could not protect themselves, and they would become the architects of their own destinies. This was not just a story of survival. This was the beginning of a new chapter, a movement to reclaim stolen innocence and disrupt the status quo of silence. Feeling emboldened, Sarah prepared to face the storm that awaited, understanding that their fight for justice was just beginning, a testament to their courage, a beacon for the lost, and a resolute stand against the darkness that had dared to silence them. They would forge ahead, a unified front against an encroaching chaos, driven by an unwavering belief that truth would always triumph over fear. Their transformation was not merely a conclusion, it was an awakening. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, igniting the darkness with a fierce promise, they understood this undeniable truth. Together, they would conquer whatever lay ahead. Now is the time to reflect on the journey Sarah and her comrades embarked on. Their story illustrates the power of resilience and the importance of acting against the darkness. If you found value in this tale of transformation and courage, take a moment. You need to subscribe now to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories that inspire change. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. You have the power to make stories like this one reach those who need to hear them. Comment your thoughts and reactions about the ending. Your voice matters. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to spread the light of this journey. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.